Somewhere out there, 1.2 billion kilometers from where you are sitting right now, something is screaming, not metaphorically, not poetically, literally screaming, broadcasting radio waves into the void at frequencies our instruments can barely comprehend. When NASA first captured that sound in 2004, scientists did not know what to make of it. It sounded like a living thing in pain. That sound belongs to Saturn. For 4 centuries, we pointed our telescopes at it and called it the jewel of the solar system. We painted it. We named constellations after it. We put it on the covers of science textbooks as the symbol of cosmic beauty and order. Every photograph ever taken of Saturn has made it look peaceful. A golden giant wearing a halo of perfect rings, drifting silently through the dark like it has nowhere to be and nothing to prove. That image is not just incomplete. It is a lie that Saturn has been telling us for 400 years, because here is what the data actually shows. Saturn is not a passive giant. It is an active, violent, and systematically destructive force, one that has shredded entire worlds, imprisoned over 100 moons, and reshaped the fate of our own planet without ever asking permission. And if the latest models coming out of planetary science in 2023 and 2024 are correct, it is not finished yet. Subscribe so you do not miss where this goes, because we are just getting started. Let us start with the most recognizable feature Saturn has, the rings, because nothing about them is what it appears to be. From Earth, they look solid. They look smooth. They look like something a jeweler designed with infinite patience and perfect tools. Early astronomers thought they were a single rigid disk like a vinyl record orbiting a planet. Even today, photographs make them look almost touchable, like you could reach out and run your finger along the edge. Do not let that fool you. If you were to fly into the rings of Saturn, you would not glide through something beautiful. You would enter a blizzard of sharp ice and rock, moving at tens of thousands of kilometers per hour, constantly colliding, shattering, and reforming. Particles ranging from the size of a grain of sand to the size of a house, all of them hurtling through space with zero mercy and zero direction. It would tear any unshielded spacecraft apart within seconds. Here is the number that should stop you cold. The rings stretch nearly 282,000 kilometers from edge to edge. That is roughly 72% of the distance between the Earth and the Moon. And yet, in many places, those rings are only 10 meters thick. 10 meters? If you scaled Saturn and its rings down to the size of a standard sheet of paper, the rings would be thinner than the paper itself. A structure that massive, that razor thin, does not form naturally from nothing. Something had to die to create it. In 2022, when a team of researchers published a hypothesis in the journal Nature, the chrysalis hypothesis, proposing that Saturn once had an additional large moon, roughly the size of our own moon, maybe larger. According to this model, that moon's orbit gradually destabilized over billions of years until it crossed what physicists call the Roche limit. That is the invisible boundary around any massive body, where tidal forces become stronger than the gravitational cohesion holding a smaller object together. Cross that line, and you do not fall into the planet. You get pulled apart first. Saturn did not swallow that moon. It dismembered it. It stripped away the outer layers, shattered the crust, and scattered trillions of icy fragments into orbit. What we have been calling the most beautiful feature in the solar system is, according to this hypothesis, a graveyard. Every photograph, every painting, every school textbook illustration of Saturn's rings is a portrait of a world that was destroyed, and Saturn has been wearing the remains ever since. Now forget everything the rings just told you, because what sits at Saturn's North Pole is arguably stranger. Nature does not draw straight lines. This is not a poetic observation, it is a physical one. Fluid dynamics, the science that governs how gases and liquids move, strongly favors curves, circles, spirals. The reason hurricanes on Earth are round, the reason galaxies form spiraling arms, the reason smoke rises in curling columns, all of it traces back to the same fundamental principle. Rotating systems in nature tend toward roundness. Saturn did not get that memo. Sitting permanently at its north pole is a hexagon. A six-sided geometric storm so precise, so mathematically exact, that when Voyager 1 first photographed it in 1980, scientists genuinely questioned whether the image was corrupted. It was not. The hexagon is real, it is stable, and as of 2026, it has been continuously observed for over 45 years without dissolving, shifting shape, or breaking down. The scale of it is difficult to absorb. Each side of the hexagon is approximately 14,300 kilometers long. The entire structure is wide enough to fit nearly 4 Earths side by side inside it. At the very center spins a vortex, a massive self-contained hurricane with an eye wider than the entire continental United States. The physical explanation involves something called stationary Rossby waves. These are large-scale atmospheric waves that, under very specific conditions of rotation speed and atmospheric depth, can lock into geometric patterns rather than circular ones. Scientists have reproduced hexagonal formations in laboratory experiments by spinning fluid at precise velocities, so we understand the mechanism in principle. What we cannot fully explain is the stability. Think of it this way. Imagine you are stirring a cup of coffee at exactly the right speed, and it forms a perfect hexagon on the surface. That alone would be remarkable. Now imagine that hexagon holds its shape perfectly for 45 years, through temperature changes, through storms erupting beneath it, through seasons changing above it. That is what Saturn is doing, and our current models of atmospheric physics have no complete answer for why. This is not a minor gap in knowledge. This is a fundamental behavior of planetary atmospheres that we cannot yet predict or fully replicate. Saturn is running a physical process that sits just outside the boundary of what our equations can cleanly describe. And it has been doing it, without interruption, longer than most people reading this have been alive. The rings are violent, the hexagon is inexplicable. But both of them are symptoms of something deeper, something you cannot see, cannot photograph, and cannot escape once you are close enough to feel it. Saturn's gravity is not just strong, it is strategic. As of 2026, Saturn holds 146 confirmed moons, more than any other planet in the solar system. That number has climbed steadily over the past decade as telescopes have improved and surveys have become more thorough. And every time astronomers find a new one, they find another object that has been captured, redirected, or fundamentally altered by Saturn's gravitational field. This is not a family, it is a collection. The distinction matters because moons in a family form together, from the same material, through the same process. What Saturn has accumulated is closer to what you would call a gravitational empire. Dozens of objects pulled from different origins, locked into orbits they did not choose, forced to move in rhythms dictated entirely by a planet they cannot escape. Physicists call one of the key mechanisms orbital resonance. This is what happens when two orbiting bodies exert regular, periodic gravitational influence on each other, eventually locking their orbital periods into precise mathematical ratios. Saturn's moon Enceladus, for example, is locked in a resonance with the neighboring moon Dione. For every one orbit Dione completes, Enceladus completes exactly 2. That relationship is not a coincidence. It is a gravitational cage that has been operating for billions of years. And here is where the story turns genuinely strange. That same gravitational squeezing, physicists call it tidal heating, is what keeps the interior of Enceladus warm enough to maintain a liquid water ocean beneath its frozen surface. A moon that, by all rights of orbital mechanics and solar distance, should be a cold, dead, inert ball of ice, is instead geologically active, venting giant plumes of water vapor hundreds of kilometers into space, carrying with it salt, organic molecules, and heat signatures that have no business existing this far from the Sun. Some researchers argue this makes Saturn a life-enabling force, and they are not wrong to argue it. But consider what is actually happening. Saturn is crushing a moon with gravity, generating heat as a byproduct, and that heat is accidentally creating conditions that might support biology. The potential for life inside Enceladus exists not because Saturn is nurturing anything, but because Saturn's destructive pressure has nowhere else to go. The warmth in that ocean is a side effect of being trapped. Stop for a moment, put your hand on your chest, feel that? You are alive, on a stable planet, orbiting a cooperative star, in a solar system that has somehow managed to hold itself together for 4.5 billion years. That stability is not guaranteed. It is not the default state of planetary systems. And if you trace the chain of causes backward far enough, you will find Saturn sitting at a critical link in that chain. Here is what the data shows. In 2005, a team of planetary scientists published what became known as the NICE model, named after the city in France, where much of the work was developed. The model proposed that in the early solar system, the giant planets did not occupy the orbits they hold today. They migrated, and as Saturn and Jupiter shifted positions, their combined gravitational influence sent a wave of destruction through the inner solar system, a period now called the Late Heavy Bombardment, roughly 3.9 billion years ago, during which thousands of asteroids were flung inward and rained down on the rocky planets, including Earth. The craters you see on the Moon are Saturn's fingerprints. But here is the paradox that should genuinely unsettle you. That same gravitational combination, Saturn and Jupiter working together, also functions as a long-term shield. Their mass deflects a significant portion of incoming comets and asteroids that would otherwise have a probability of striking Earth. Remove Saturn from its current position, alter its mass, shift its orbit even slightly, and the models suggest the impact rate on Earth increases substantially. The planet that bombarded us is also the planet protecting us, and it has done this before. It moved once. The NICE model is not a settled theory. It remains an active area of scientific modeling and debate. But the core insight it offers is this: Saturn is not a static backdrop in our solar system. It is a dynamic gravitational actor whose past behavior has already shaped our history, and whose future behavior remains, by the honest admission of planetary scientists, not entirely predictable. You are here, in part because Saturn has been where it is. That is not poetry. That is orbital mechanics. Here is something that almost nobody talks about when they show you pictures of Saturn. Those rings are dying, not slowly, in some abstract geological sense that has no relevance to anything human. Dying on a timeline that, when measured against the full age of the solar system, is startlingly abrupt. Every single day, Saturn's rings lose approximately 10,000 tons of material. That mass ice particles, dust, fragments of what was once a moon, gets pulled out of the ring plane by Saturn's own magnetic field and rains down into the upper atmosphere of the planet below. Scientists have a name for it. They call it ring rain. The phenomenon was first theorized decades ago, but it was data from the Cassini spacecraft, published by James O'Donoghue and colleagues in a 2019 paper in the journal Icarus, that gave us the first precise measurements of just how fast this process is actually occurring. The conclusion was sobering. At the current rate of loss, Saturn's rings have somewhere between 100 million and 300 million years left before they disappear entirely. In cosmic terms, that is not very long. The universe is 13.8 billion years old. The solar system is 4.5 billion years old. The rings themselves, based on current estimates, are likely somewhere between 10 million and 100 million years old, which means they are not an ancient permanent feature of Saturn. They are a relatively recent development, and they are already on their way out. Now stop and absorb what that actually means for you personally. You were born during the single window in the 4.5 billion year history of this solar system, when Saturn has rings visible enough to see with a modest telescope from Earth. Before the moon that created them was destroyed, there were no rings. After the ring rain finishes its work, there will be no rings again. The specific arrangement of ice and rock that every human being who has ever lived has looked up and seen, that arrangement is temporary. It is, in the most precise sense of the word, a once-in-a-solar-system lifetime event. Some models, including work from Estrada and colleagues in 2023, suggest that new ring material could eventually be supplied by future moons crossing the Roche limit. That possibility exists, but it remains a hypothesis without confirmation. What is confirmed is the loss, 10,000 tons every day without pause. On September 15, 2017, humanity said goodbye to the most successful deep space mission ever sent to another planet. Not with a malfunction, not with a miscalculation, with a deliberate choice. The Cassini spacecraft had been orbiting Saturn since 2004, 13 years of continuous observation, 294 orbits completed, 453,000 photographs taken, 635 gigabytes of scientific data transmitted back to Earth. It had discovered active geysers on Enceladus. It had mapped the hydrocarbon lakes of Titan. It had flown through Saturn's ring plane and survived. It had changed our understanding of planetary science more than any mission since Voyager. And then NASA pointed it directly at Saturn and told it to dive. The reason was Enceladus, because Cassini had discovered that Enceladus likely harbors a liquid water ocean beneath its surface, an ocean that might, under the right conditions, support life. Mission controllers faced a serious problem. Cassini was running out of fuel. An uncontrolled spacecraft drifting through the Saturn system would eventually impact one of those moons. And if Cassini carried any surviving Earth microorganisms in its structure, even dormant ones, an uncontrolled crash into Enceladus could contaminate the very environment scientists most wanted to study cleanly. So they chose to destroy it instead. On its final orbit, Cassini entered Saturn's upper atmosphere at 113,000 kilometers per hour. It fired its thrusters to maintain antenna orientation, continuing to transmit data in real time for as long as physically possible. Scientists on Earth watched the signal weaken, flicker, and then cut out permanently as the spacecraft broke apart and vaporized, becoming part of the planet it had spent 13 years studying. It took the signal 83 minutes to reach Earth after Cassini was already gone. The data it collected in those final seconds is still being analyzed today. Papers based on Cassini's archive continue to be published in 2026, nearly a decade after the mission ended. Saturn consumed our messenger, and we learned something even from that. It would be intellectually dishonest to spend this much time building a case against Saturn without acknowledging the strongest arguments on the other side. So let us be precise about what the counter-argument actually says. A significant number of planetary scientists would push back on the framing of Saturn as dangerous, and their reasoning is not trivial. Saturn, they would argue, does not act, it does not intend, it is a gravitational body obeying physics, and assigning danger to it is a human projection onto a process that is entirely indifferent. The rings did not form because Saturn is violent, they formed because orbital mechanics and the Roche limit are real phenomena that apply equally everywhere in the universe. More specifically, the same tidal forces that shredded a moon to create the rings are currently keeping Enceladus geologically alive. The same gravitational reach that locked 146 moons into captive orbits also gave Titan a thick atmosphere stable enough to make it the most Earth-like environment we have ever found beyond our own planet. The same orbital dynamics that drove the late heavy bombardment also produced a long-term shield that has reduced Earth's impact rate for billions of years. Saturn does not choose its outcomes. It produces all of them simultaneously. Einstein famously called the cosmological constant his greatest blunder, only for later evidence to suggest the universe actually does contain something behaving exactly like it. Science has a long history of finding that apparently contradictory things are both true at once, operating at different scales. Saturn as destroyer and Saturn as enabler are not mutually exclusive. They are the same planet, doing the same thing, and we are still deciding what to call it. The question Saturn has left open will not stay open forever. In 2028, NASA is scheduled to launch Dragonfly, a rotorcraft lander designed to fly across the surface of Titan, sampling its chemistry at dozens of different locations. If Dragonfly lands successfully and reaches Titan's surface around 2034 as currently projected, it will be the first mission in history to directly analyze whether the organic chemistry present on another world has moved in the direction of biology. The results will not just tell us about Titan, they will redefine where we look for life across the entire universe. Further out on the planning horizon, NASA's 2023 Planetary Science Decadal Survey formally recommended a dedicated Enceladus mission, an orbiter and lander combination designed specifically to sample the plumes erupting from that moon's south pole. Search directly for biosignatures. No launch date is confirmed yet, but the scientific priority has been officially established, and right now, in 2026, the James Webb Space Telescope is actively observing Titan's atmosphere with a level of chemical precision that Cassini could never achieve. The data is coming in as you watch this. Every answer Saturn gives us seems to produce 3 questions we had not thought to ask yet. That pattern has held for 4 centuries. There is no particular reason to expect it to stop now. Saturn does not know you exist. It does not know it destroyed a moon. It does not know it protected your planet. It does not know a spacecraft named Cassini spent 13 years memorizing its face before dying inside it. It has no awareness of the rings it is slowly consuming, or the ocean it accidentally keeps warm, or the hexagon it has been drawing at its pole since before your species learned to write. It is just gravity, doing what gravity does. And yet here you are, made of atoms forged in stars, sitting on a rock held in place by the same force, trying to understand it. That might be the most remarkable thing in this entire story.